Peace seems to be back in consideration in Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered a two-day ceasefire. Russian troops have been asked to hold their fire for 36 hours, starting at noon on the 6th of January. The ceasefire is on the occasion of the Orthodox Church's Christmas. Earlier on Thursday, Patriarch Kirill of Moscow, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, had implored both sides to observe a Christmas truce. Remember, Orthodox Christianity is the majority religion in both Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine had earlier called the Patriarch's appeal a cynical trap and an element of propaganda. In the past, the Russian Orthodox Church and Patriarch Kirill have openly backed Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The truce also comes after the deadly Ukrainian attack in Kiev. The Russian Defense Ministry has said 89 Russian soldiers were killed in this attack. This is the highest casualty figure that has been made public. The Russian installed head of the Donetsk region released this video. The Russian Deputy Defense Minister and the governor of Russia's Samara region are visiting the injured men in hospitals. These men are said to be soldiers wounded in the Ukrainian strike. Many are said to be conscripts from the Samara region. The attack has drawn heavy criticism. Russian commanders are facing the heat for allowing this to happen, while the top brass seems to have escaped public ire. The readiness and professionalism of Russian leaders on the ground is being questioned. Russia has blamed the unauthorized use of mobile phones by the troops for giving away their location. Russia has said the officials responsible will be brought to justice. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said he discussed the Russia-Ukraine war in detail with Putin. He reportedly pressed Putin to declare a unilateral ceasefire in Ukraine. Russia may have declared the Orthodox Christmas ceasefire after considering appeals from both the Patriarch and Erdogan. Or it could be due to the political fallout of the Makivka attack. But Putin also reportedly told Erdogan that Russia was open to dialogue, but only if Ukraine accepts the loss of its territories. Russia annexed 4 regions of Ukraine last September, but does not control any of them completely. Erdogan said he would talk to the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky later on Thursday.
İzninizi alacağım. Zelenski ile bir görüşmem olacak. Bu görüşmede de yine aynı şekilde Sayın Putin'le yaptığımız görüşmeler ve Rusya-Ukrayna ilişkilerini daha yumuşak bir zemine nasıl oturtabiliriz? Bunları görüşeceğiz. Tahıl koridorunu görüşeceğiz. Amonyak olayını görüşeceğiz. Gübre olayını görüşeceğiz.
Zelensky may not be willing to soften his stance, though. He has asked Ukraine's Western allies to send more weapons, including tanks. The US is reportedly planning to announce yet another military aid package in the coming weeks. In the past, Zelensky has categorically stated that Ukraine will not cede any territory to Russia. It remains to be seen if Ukraine will honor the Christmas truce, and if it does, whether that would indicate any real change in Kiev's stated objectives. For more on this, we are now joined by Dmitry Babich, a political analyst at The Voice of Russia. He's been a journalist for 25 years. Mr. Babich, welcome back to WION. Now, let me ask you this. Do you believe Kiev will agree to this unilateral ceasefire that has been announced by Moscow for 2 days?
No, unfortunately, I don't think Kiev will accept the ceasefire. I would like to add that the Russian Orthodox Church never supported the war. The Church didn't condemn the Russian army as the West wanted it to do, but Patriarch Kirill and the Orthodox Church in general, they suffer greatly from this war because, let me remind you that there are faithful of the Russian Orthodox Church on both sides of the border. A lot of people, actually the majority in Ukraine, still belong to the Russian Orthodox Church. So the church was very much interested in peace. But unfortunately, the regime reigning in Kiev, it is taking the church's property, giving it to another structure that they created themselves, the Ukrainian government. So, of course, the Russian Orthodox Church is not happy about Mr. Zelensky and his government. And Mr. Zelensky proclaimed himself a non-believing person, an atheist, from the beginning of his rule. So he doesn't care about the Christmas or about the losses. He will continue the war, unfortunately. However, I think this is a very important step from the Russian side. We see that it is possible on the Russian side to stop hostilities. Of course, Russian army will respond if there is an attack from the Ukrainian side, but the Russian side will not be attacking during these 2 days.
All right. But let me play the devil's advocate here. Critics say Putin may have declared the ceasefire in the wake of the Makivka attack, where Russia, by its own admission, lost almost 90 of its soldiers. And now with the Russian commanders being blamed for the setback, is it not time for Putin to halt the special military operation altogether? I know that Putin has said on multiple occasions, including reportedly to Erdogan recently, that he's open to a dialogue. But the problem is that he keeps laying down conditions which are obviously unacceptable to Kiev.
Well, let me tell you that, unfortunately, the blame is on both sides here. Let me remind you that in the beginning of the war, in February and in early March, Mr. Zelensky said that he would agree to the neutral status of Ukraine, and he suggested postponing discussing the status of Crimea and Donbass later, for a later period. This was acceptable for Russia, so Russia sent its delegation to Istanbul. It looked like the truce was very near. And then the Ukrainian side just stopped negotiations, returned its delegation to Kiev. Our foreign minister, Mr. Lavrov, says it was done under pressure from Americans. I don't know, I can tell you honestly, I didn't listen to the phone conversations of Mr. Zelensky and Mr. Biden, but I can tell you that from that moment, suddenly Ukraine and the West started aiming to winning this war, to kind of not just seeking a compromise, but winning the war and defeating Russia completely, which is not feasible, which can only lead to a lot of losses on both sides. As for the responsibility of commanders for this strike in Makivka, let me tell you that Makivka is located in hundreds of miles from the dividing line. So obviously American high precision weapons were used, or maybe German or French ones, but definitely not Ukrainian made. Ukraine does not have such missiles. And the problem is that it was done at the sacred moment for every Ukrainian, for every Russian. It was done exactly at the moment when the New Year came, when actually soldiers were calling their mothers, their fathers, to wish them Happy New Year. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian military used this. But in Russia and in Ukraine, this is considered to be very bad. It's like using religious belief of a certain person in order to make him or her vulnerable and killing him. Just like the English colonial troops in India used the fact that there were religious soldiers of Muslim and Hindu origin who could not bite the bullet. It's the same kind of tactic that the Ukrainian generals used during this infamous strike.
Infamous strike, fine, but there are those who say that perhaps Putin has ordered this ceasefire only to earn brownie points because his troops have suffered a massive setback in Makivka. But on that note, Dmitry Babich, thank you so much for speaking to WION. We're also joined at this point by Sviatoslav Yurash, a Ukrainian MP. Mr. Yurash, thank you very much for speaking to WION. In fact, let's also tell our viewers that he was earlier a senior spokesperson for Volodymyr Zelensky's successful 2019 presidential election campaign. All right, let me ask you this. The most important question right now is, will Kiev agree to this unilateral ceasefire that has been announced by Moscow for 2 days?
We at least a clear peace plan in which Russia first is to get out of our country. Russia has invaded our country in the biggest war since the Second World War, invading our country, killing countless hundreds of thousands, destroying homes, destroying lives, and imagining that we can gift for that, anything to Russia, is a delusion. We will fight back until Russia leaves our country alone and let us decide our own future. All the pretensions of a ceasefire are beside the point. Russia has already attacked many different towns that Ukraine has liberated since the start of the war, and it is clearly showing to the whole of the world that Russia isn't aiming any kind of ceasefire. It's aiming at destruction of Ukraine, it's definitely against the war, and we will fight against it at every step.
All right. Now, of course, Kiev and Moscow keep blaming each other for the war being prolonged. Putin has said on more than one occasion that he is open to a dialogue, but then he obviously is laying down conditions that are unacceptable to Kiev. The West, too, is now running low on weapons. After continuously supplying ammunition to Ukraine, the war has now dragged on for 10 months. Do you believe the time has come to give peace a chance?
We have given peace a chance. President Zelensky has published a very clear 10-point peace plan where it is only the reality that Russia must understand that if it keeps on fighting, it shall be humiliated and it shall be punished for the fact that it was destroying our nation throughout this conflict. Again, we have wanted peace from the very beginning. That's why we pursued this process for 9 years. And as a result of which, Russia is invading our country wholeheartedly, aiming to destroy our statehood. It's not my words. Mr. Putin said as much in hours-long speeches that he gave before the invasion. So the point here is that peace is something that we've been aiming for from the beginning, and the only action has destroyed it, not just for Europe, not just for Ukraine, but for the entirety of the world, is Russia. And again, as soon as Russia leaves our country alone, as soon as it lets us decide our own future, the sooner we have peace.
All right. Well, peace is what the world hopes for, but we don't know if it is anywhere in sight at the moment. Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much, Mr. Yurash, for speaking to WION.